Let's talk some more about end of series Yuji and his potential, but of course, spoilers beware. All right, so first of all, if you didn't see my video from a month ago where I talked about Yuji at his full potential, then that's probably a good place for you to start. Because in that video, I just talked about everything that Yuji has by the end of the series and just how crazy his potential is for what he might one day become after more training and more experience. So, in response to that video, I got sent in this comment from JC where he detailed a bunch of his own ideas about this full potential version of Yuji, and then he paired that with a few questions like you can see here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over what JC sent me, and then as we're going along, I'm going to be answering that first question of would this be theoretically possible, and then we'll address the second two questions at the end. All right, so the first thing JC brought up was in relation to Yuji's version of Cleave. Because remember, in the series, all we got to see was Yuji's version of Dismantle. And Sukuna's version of Cleave requires him to touch the target. So JC speculated, what if Yuji's version of Cleave has his own binding vow where he can only use it when he hits a black flash? And basically, it would be like a devastatingly strong attack called Divergent Black Slash. And I think this would be really cool. That's one of the things I wish we got to see more of, like Yuji kind of making his own version of Shrine, because we know his dismantles were way different from Sukuna's, right? So I would love to see what his idea of a cleave was, or especially what his idea of a fire arrow was, right? But yeah, I think this would be theoretically possible. You could make some sort of binding vow, tying back your cleave to only be accessible during a black flash, and making that type of vow would probably make it crazy amped, right? And it's already insanely strong because he can perceive the soul. So I think that's a really cool idea that is possible. Next, JC has a few ideas all tied to Yuji and his blood manipulation, saying that down the line, when he gets a mastery of it, it would be cool if he kind of had the Choso face marks appear on him as well. And in addition to that, what if he ate not only the Curse Womb Death paintings that we know he ate, but he also just went ahead and ate the remains of Choso and Eso and Ketchizu as well, and kind of got even more powers based on that. Again, you know, the mastery of blood manipulation, the Choso face marks, but what if he also was able to develop like the Wing King and, you know, the Brat of the Blood like his other two brothers had? And then JC goes on to say, if he has all of these brothers and blood manipulation powers, what if he then got a transformation? Because most shonens have transformations, you know, like Super Saiyan, you know, Luffy's gears, Bankai, all that jazz, right? So what if Yuji was able to like manifest his true blood manipulation powers, again, get those face marks, get like the skull manifested on his back, and then he would be able to fully utilize all of the blood manipulation powers. I do think this is a really cool idea if we want to give Yuji like a hypothetical shonen transformation type ability. But I don't think in terms of it being theoretically possible that that's not really something we saw in JJK. Obviously, you know, Sukuna has a transformation like to become him, and the other incarnated sorcerers, excuse me, have like transformations to become their true self. So, you know, there is somewhat of a precedent, but I don't think there's a precedent in this way. So I don't think this would happen within JJK, but transformation part of it aside, I do think that Yuji, you know, could theoretically eat Choso and Eso and Ketchizu if those bodies are still out there somewhere, and potentially gain even more mastery or more facets of blood manipulation. Where it stands right now, we don't really know what Yuji has beyond just like literal blood manipulation, because that's all we saw him do against Sukuna, right? And he couldn't even master convergence yet. So Yuji might be able to do Wing King and stuff without eating this version of his brother, right? Like that might just be something he unlocks at some point as his mastery develops. Obviously, he doesn't have the skull thing on his back, but still, like if he had enough blood to play around with, he could probably do this. But insofar as his blood being like rot the same way that, you know, the brother's blood is poisonous, I don't know if Yuji would have that or not, just because I think that was mostly a product of them being half cursed spirit. So, you know, Yuji has human blood, but maybe just the act of eating the Curse Womb Death paintings like he did could have transformed his blood to get that same toxic property. So I think that's at least possible, but it's kind of hard to say for sure one way or the other. And then finally, JC had an idea for Yuji's version of the fire arrow, that he would use a binding vow to essentially kind of seal it away or combine it with his blood manipulation. So he wouldn't actually cast like a fire arrow in the same way Sukuna did, but his blood would now have a burning property to it. So like he kind of gets that bonus to his blood attacks in general in exchange for not using the full-on attack like this. And I think something like that seems to be possible within the rules of binding vows in JJK. Again, I can't say with any certainty that yes, he could do exactly that, but I feel like that plays within what we know. And then finally, JC had a really cool idea for Yuji's domain expansion. So we know that when Yuji first cast his domain, there was a rule of non-violence, right? Because Yuji and Sukuna just take a stroll down memory lane. And that's because Yuji was trying to give Sukuna a chance to see things from another perspective, right? Give him a chance to change his ways. Now, obviously, Sukuna didn't go for that. He wasn't having it, right? And so that's why Yuji then started attacking with his domain with the slashes, right? But what if Sukuna had agreed to change his ways? What if his perspective had shifted and Yuji had gotten through to him? Then obviously it doesn't make much sense for Yuji to have just attacked him then, right? And you could say, well, the domain would have ended and they would have gone on their ways. But I think what's cool and makes way more sense within the rules of JJK is what if there is a vow that must be taken in order to end the domain. So like, yeah, you can walk away. We can not have any violence here, but I'm going to need you to agree to change your ways. So maybe the domain has the power to impose a binding vow on someone else. Meaning if Sukuna had agreed, he could have been like, okay, I will never harm anyone else for the rest of my days. And then boom, the domain ends, but now Sukuna is under that vow. And if he were to ever hurt anybody, then boom, he breaks the binding vow and really bad stuff is going to happen, right? So I think that would be cool. Like Yuji basically provides his opponents a chance, and if they do agree to it, then they then have to, abide by whatever rule Yuji sets upon them. In Sukuna's case, it's to not harm anybody else, right? But in whatever case, he could set whatever rule he wants, right? And if the opponent disagrees, well, boom, then they're going to start getting hit with slashes. And I think this is possible within what we understand about JJK, because I mean, you don't need a domain to even agree to binding vows with people. So I think that would be a really cool facet of his domain. So yeah, I love that. Okay, so now let's circle back around to JC's questions. And again, we've been answering the first one as we've been going. So for the second question of, would this theoretical Yuji we've been talking about be able to go toe-to-toe with Sukuna? And I think yes and no. If we just say that Yuji has those abilities and we're tacking those on to end of series Yuji, then no, he stands no chance because Sukuna and Gojo were just so much stronger than everybody else that even if we give all of those things to Yuji's bag, he's not going to be able to do anything, right? But if we want to take a hypothetical Yuji 15 to 20 years in the future that has just continuously trained and honed his skill with all of these things, then yeah, I think that version of like prime full potential Yuji could stand toe-to-toe with Sukuna. Now, does he just automatically stomp Sukuna? No, because again, I think we got to put some respect on just how built different Gojo and Sukuna are. But I do think Yuji could hypothetically reach that type of level with enough time. And then finally, for the third question, what do soul slashes do to characters that aren't Sukuna? And this is a fantastic question because we really only got to see Yuji utilize them for a very specific purpose, and that was to split Sukuna and Megami, right? So I don't even know if we can extrapolate to like what would that do to somebody else, because it probably wouldn't do anything unless they're an incarnated sorcerer, right? But Yuji could certainly just damage somebody, like not trying to split their soul, but just trying to hurt it. The very same way he can hurt people's souls by punching them, like we saw with Mahito, right? So I think his soul slashes under normal circumstances would just be akin to the soul split katana. Like he's going to negate durability and just deal damage directly to your soul. So like you could maybe think of it as like if he slices off your soul's arm, then your real arm's gonna fall off. Like I don't know about if it's that like 1-to-1 and precise, but at the very least he's like dealing massive damage that 99.9% of people in the verse will not be able to heal. That's my 2 cents on it. JC, thank you so much for the support and for the very thoughtful response and analysis to that original Yuji video. I love diving into these hypotheticals with y'all, so I just appreciate it. And finally, thank you guys so much for watching.